for what's ahead.
Queensland's Chief Health Officer is under fire again after denying a son the chance to say goodbye to his dying father. Mark and Anneli Killian have been refused a travel exemption into Queensland despite being fully vaccinated to see Mark's 80-year-old father Franz, who is dying from pancreatic cancer. The couple flew into Sydney from Los Angeles on Tuesday morning after receiving exemption from Australian Border Force and New South Wales Health. They're now stuck in Sydney hotel quarantine, Queensland denying their request to enter the state. Queensland Health states the public health risk with international travellers is too high a risk. Joining me live now, my panel, Liberal MP Tim Wilson and the Labor Party Peter Murphy. Your thoughts on this? Fully vaccinated, testing negative to get back as well, and it's a no.
Oh, it's hard, isn't it? It's tragic. I mean, I can't imagine what that family feels like. I understand from media reports this could or could not be correct, though, that they'd actually also been trying to come home for some time and had been denied a few times to come home.
But they were allowed to this time from Border Force,
and we've heard so many stories like this, haven't we, of people wanting to go overseas to say goodbye to dying relatives, come home to say goodbye to dying relatives, and have not been allowed to. So I feel compassion for this family. There's health advice. I hope that the health advice is what is guiding the decision, and it's another really stark and sad reminder of why we have to get the vaccination rollout, the quarantine system and everything in place as fast as we can.
They're vaccinated. They are vaccinated. You said get the vaccine rollout. They're vaccinated.
Yeah,
they get a negative test.
Yeah.
Don't we start to question this decision and say this is not a reasonable decision?
Well, that's why I say I would assume and I would hope that it's based on robust health advice, and it is a tragic situation that we have seen before. I hope we don't keep seeing it.
Is it
and
right
it's
for
a
a
reason
bureaucrat
to get all of this right.
This decision? Is that the best thing?
I don't know who made the decision.
It was Jeanette
I'm not
Young.
part of it.
It was Jeanette Young.
You know, the question is how the decision got made, and as I said, we have to get all of these procedures in place properly, vaccination rollout and quarantine, so that we can have our borders open.
Quarantine has nothing to do with this case.
Well,
they are in quarantine right now.
It
That's
does.
the problem. How?
It does, because we have taken so long to get processes in place that aren't still in place, that there are going to continue to be problems with Australians wanting to leave Australia and Australians wanting to come home until there is a national coordinated standard and plan for all of this.
Tim, your view on this?
We've just seen a classic demonstration of what happens when you run opposition from snark rather than substance. The reality is decisions should be made in terms of policy based on proportionality. And I think we all look at this case and go, this seems, we all have compassion, obviously, for both the tragically dying individual, but the families who are trying to get to them. And I would have thought there could be a decision or a pathway that was proportionate. That would have to be stepped through very clearly. As you say, they've been vaccinated, they've gone through quarantine. The question is how, and I would have thought the Queensland Government should at least be looking at avenues of how before giving a blanket no.
Yesterday, Franz said to his son, Mark, I'm done, and now he's apparently unable to talk. Mark doesn't want to even tell him he can't come to see him. I mean, there has to be more compassion versus risk, as you say, something proportionate. On the face of it, this just seems
tragic.
It is tragic.
But without real, a genuine weighing up of the risk here, the risk would be infinitesimal.
Well, I wouldn't say that the risk is infinitesimal. We know that even when people are vaccinated, there's still a risk of transmission, which is why the constant snark about the vaccine rollout is false. The reality is there is still a continued risk. The question is, can you mitigate that risk to address and to support somebody so they can see somebody before they die? Now, we know in the height of the pandemic last year, that was not the case, and many people tragically had to say goodbye to loved ones through PPE or through glass. We know as people are vaccinated and that environment changes that there's potential to do so, and at some point we're going to confront these issues as a nation, which is why it should be focused on what is it we need to do to enable people in these extreme situations to be in a position. We've allowed it through Border Force for them to come into the country. New South Wales Health has been generous in mitigating its risk, and now Queensland should follow suit.
Well, the risk again, though, is infinitesimal in terms of an actual spread, because by now we know the drill, we know these situations. There should be measures in place where they say this They're vaccinated, this meets the threshold, here's a way we can do it quite safely, let's let them do it.
But Tim's answer is not particularly different to mine, except for his little snark about the vaccines, because here's the point. He is absolutely right. If you're vaccinated, it is still possible to spread COVID. But if more people in this country were vaccinated, the impact on them of it being spread would be less, and
but we're
the
not
risk
talking about
would be
them going out
reduced.
in the general community.
The risk would be reduced,
small,
and we would be able to have
healthcare workers and the dad
Sure,
themselves. So
but-
that's why you.
But we would be able to have processes in this country in a different sort of risk assessment, like you talked about, proportional decisions. We'd have a different risk assessment if we had a higher concentration of people having been vaccinated, and that's the part about the vaccine rollout that is really important as part of this conversation.
Can I take it then? The difference actually between us is that I've said I think the Queensland State Government should be looking at ways to proportionally manage the risk to enable this family in this incredibly difficult time to be reunited, to say goodbye to a loved one. Are you prepared to say to the Queensland State Government as well that they should do the same?
And that's what I've said is I would assume and I would hope that this is based on the robust health advice, which is part of what you've said about taking proportionate steps.
So you agree that the Queensland State Government should look at...
What I've said is I would hope that a resolution can be found for this family, because it is tragic and it is heartbreaking. And it has to be based on the best health advice for everyone, for this family and for the community.
OK, I want to talk about the tax system to do with housing, which you're in the headlines in again about Tim Wilson. You've spoken about bringing some balance to house prices and spoken about the way we tax income versus capital growth. Let's drill down here. You're talking about getting rid of the CGT discount?
I always talk about substantial tax reform. I never talk about specifics in isolation, because if you do that, you're just arguing some people should pay more tax, and you shouldn't look at rebasing the system, which is what I've argued all along. We currently have it where if you're paying income tax, you can pay it up to 45, 47 cents in the dollar, whereas capital, it can be much less than that. There needs to be a proper rebalancing and a substantial look at tax reform. I said this is my first speech. I've said it in just about every interview I've had with you since, Tom, and it's funny I don't change the script, but it is having a direct impact in part in the capital that's flowing into the housing market.
But it's essentially part of a broad sweeping reform. You're not saying just do this, but the CGT discount is a problem for house prices.
Well, what happens with CGT discount is it encourages capital to go into people holding assets. And of course, if you're getting passive income, and it's getting taxed at a lower rate, it will incentivise that more than it will in terms of labour. And I absolutely believe that we need more redress and more balance around that. And that includes cutting income tax to make sure that labour is incentivised. Because that's critically, and this is the important thing, Tom, which is young Australians only have their intellectual and physical labour, whereas, of course, capital interests are normally entrenched, older and more established, and they shouldn't get preference simply because they have more capital.
Labor once had a policy on this. Will you again?
Yeah, I didn't hear Tim campaigning in support of Labor's policy on this at the time.
No, I didn't, because you just wanted to increase taxes.
There is no doubt that there are changes that need to happen to the tax system, and surprisingly, I'm not going to announce right here and now what Labor's tax policy will be on the CGT.
So you still think
I think there's changes
tax treatment within housing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I also think there's a real problem with supply, as a number of leading economists have said in response to the research that has come out today. And we know that housing is less affordable than ever before, rent is higher than ever before, homelessness is higher than ever before, and there is a problem with supply. And the government did say in 2017 that it would address supply in part by releasing more Commonwealth land for building, and that hasn't happened. And that's also why Labor has a policy to support more, not just social housing, but affordable housing.
Supply is basically on the state
to address supply. Well, we have it, no. You can do it federally. Of course you can. You can have a policy like Federal Labor and Anthony Albanese has to support the building of more affordable and social housing to address some of the supply issues.
Yes.
Also affordable housing.
But this is people buying a house. The supply side is essentially the state side and where they release.
No, it's to support the building of affordable and social housing as well. That's supply side issues. You also need somewhere to build it.
But this is actually just a completely false paradigm. The fundamental difference between the Liberal Party and the Labor Party at the moment is Labor wants to build more housing that the government owns that they will rent to you, or your super fund owns with your money that they will rent to you. The Liberal Party wants the foundation of housing policy to be empowering homeowners to own their stake in the future of the country.
But they haven't done anything except for have policies that are helping to drive house prices up.
And we've consistently supported.
But
policies,
the super elements are your view, not
haven't.
your government's.
Sorry?
Yeah.
The view on super is your view, not your
No, but we've had a number of measures which are focused on empowering young Australians to be able to buy their first home and get into the housing market. And that's only one of the many measures that I want. But I absolutely want...
Because housing prices
Because up
are too
until
high.
1990, it was entirely logical that young Australians save for a deposit to buy a first home and then save for their retirement.
Okay.
We've engaged in a form of economic social engineering, and Labor's completely hostile to the change for the reason that they want to favour super funds over home ownership.
Check out Tim's Twitter if you want to know more. Tim
Home first, super second.
Yeah, he's got a campaign and a book, we all know that.
Soon, when we come back on Newsday, we're standing by to take you live to Victoria. We'll see where the health authorities there are actually going to announce